I, Chris Hansen, Chairman Pro Temp of the Utah Board of Oil, Gas, and Mining, have determined today's public meeting will be held without an anchor location pursuant to Utah Code Section 52-4-207(4). The determination is based on the fact the state of Utah and Salt Lake County continue to mitigate the impacts of the pandemic caused by the COVID-19 virus. Specified grounds for making this determination are contained in the electronic meeting determination that was executed and published in connection with the August 26, 2020 agenda and notice of today's public meeting. Per applicable statute, that determination will expire within 30 days of issuance of the electronic meeting determination. Accordingly, the date the August determination will expire is September 17th, 2020. The board will determine whether the September 2020 public meeting will be held electronically based on public health and safety concerns existing on or about September 17th, 2020. In the interim, all collateral hearings involving the division and board occurring before September 17th, 2020, including matters involving a hearing officer, will also be held electronically. Having completed that task, we will move forward with our briefing session, and I will turn the time over to you, Mr. Baza.
Thank you, Chairman Pro Tem. Can you hear and see me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I'm John Baza. I'm the Director of the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining. I'd like to welcome all the board members and other participants to our August virtual meeting. As I look out my office window, it's a bright sunny day here in Salt Lake City, so hopefully it's the same from wherever you're connecting from. The first item on the briefing schedule today is we are going to hear from our Deputy Director for Oil and Gas, Mr. Bart Kettle. We are going to give you a briefing on disposal facilities, which is an area that the oil and gas program regulates. It's an integral part of oil and gas production and waste management operations. And as part of that, it's a significant part of our rules. And Bart just wanted to have the chance to provide you with an overview of how we do that and what our significant concerns are right now. So Bart, I'll turn the time over to you.
Okay, thank you, Director Baza. I'm going to go ahead and do a screen share to present. Please let me know when that screen share is visible on your end.
I can see it, Bart.
Okay, thank you. So for the board, what I'd like to kind of start out presenting is, if you recall correctly, in 2018 and then again in 2019, the oil and gas program came before the board in the briefing session to give an overview of disposal facilities in the state and a process that we're referring to as 5-year renewal. And so to maintain communication with the board, we'd like to kind of follow up on that as just a brief overview of the status of disposal facilities and what we do and what we administer in them. And then I'd be happy to answer any questions. So for starters, maybe to just kind of lay the groundwork of what is a waste disposal facility in the context that we're discussing right now. We really deal with 3 types of facilities in the state. I'm going to spend most of my time talking about 2. One of them would be an evaporation ponds, and so literally an impoundment that's lined with liners used to evaporate produced waters. The second would be a land farm. Land farms are designed to remediate oil impacted or hydrocarbon impacted soils. The division does administer emergency pits. We only have a handful of those, and those are all connected to saltwater disposal wells. Another type of disposal facility related to the oil and gas industry some of you may have heard of would be a landfill. Landfills are administered by the Department of Environmental Quality. They are not administered by the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining. And so just kind of at a high level, what is the role of the oil and gas program in facility regulation? Honestly, on some level, it's cradle to grave. So we do the permitting for the facilities, do the review of them to assure they're in compliance with administrative rule in the initial permit submission, complete inspections through the life of the facility. We complete our 5-year renewal of waste disposal facilities to assure that once again it's in compliance with the rules and that bonding is adequate for the facility. If there are enforcement actions at the site, we address those, and then of course reclamation at the end of the life of the facility. So just kind of a couple of numbers and on facilities. So there's really 2 types of facilities. A land farm or an evaporation pond could be a commercial or non-commercial site. And really the distinction, obviously, a commercial is the facilities operated for profit as a business. And non-commercial sites are generally operated by an oil and gas operator that operates that facility only for their own waste stream and not for profit. Couple of numbers for the board. We have received in the oil and gas program 30 5-year renewal applications. We've completed 26 of those applications at this point. We're in the process of reviewing the final 4. We have received 1 new application recently, and we've got 2 facilities that are currently being remediated. From an inspection standpoint, let me back up just a step. On the commercial, non-commercial concept, just to give you a feel for what the numbers are in the state, there's 21 commercial facilities in the state and 8 non-commercial facilities in the state that are considered active facilities. From an inspection standpoint, year to date, we've conducted 131 inspections at these sites. Our average is somewhere over 200 inspections per year at these facilities, across all facilities, not per individual site. And so to give you an idea of some of the things that we're working towards, the image that you're seeing now is not a live image. It's actually from a test site that we're currently developing. As you know, we've introduced the concept of inspection prioritization for wells. We're expanding that to include facilities, and this is just a snapshot of that. In a real brief high-level overview, it's an evidence-based approach to kind of help staff have the most current information available of where inspections might be needed. It brings 2 things to the table. It brings information in a manner that's useful and easily usable to staff in the form of the spatial display you're looking at. And then it also has a customizable report component. And then of course, one of the critical parts is it brings real-time information to the staff. And over time, as we continue to develop these priorities, it will also start to give our management feedback on how the program's running. And correspondingly, we will be relaying some of that information to you as a board as well. So just kind of the path forward as we look at it, waste disposal facilities are obviously a difficult subject matter because the mere subject is waste. And so by default, that's a hard subject to address. So we know that we've got a winding path before us. It's full of snags. We're aware of that. Our program has worked very hard the last 3 years to improve our administration over the facilities. We feel like we've made great progress. We don't intend to stop where we are now. We continue to push forward. And I think it would be appropriate to also give credit to the industry. Both the oil and gas operators, who are the producers of the waste, are taking steps to deal with their waste responsibly, and also the facility operators themselves, who've been very diligent in understanding the 5-year renewal process, who are looking at the regulations and are working to stay in compliance and be good operators. So with that, Director Baza, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions if there's any from the board or the audience.
Do we have any questions from board members?
I have a quick question. Bart, oil that's skimmed off those evaporation ponds, does that ever happen? And is that reported to the board and appropriate conservation taxes paid on it?
Yes, that's a very good question. I'm glad that you asked that question. That's actually one of the subject matters I intended to address in my presentation, and apparently got a little nervous and forgot. So yes, there is a percent of hydrocarbons that enter facilities as part of the process. Through the permitting, the intent of how they're permitted would be that that is captured in the headworks portion of the facility and doesn't end up on the evaporations pond. In fact, it's required by administrative rule. And so those hydrocarbons are recovered. They are sold. However, I think the question you're asking is disposal facilities don't provide a revenue source to fund the oil and gas program directly. That there is no conservation tax on them or fee for them. And so that would be one of the places where, as the conservation tax has been stretched more and more as time goes on, that we may want to take a look at is how do we fully fund adequate regulation that supports the interest of the state, supports the program that is the regulator, and also the industry that's being regulated. Thank you.
Do they have to report that skim oil to you on the monthly production report?
We have a quarterly report from disposal facilities that is reported to us, yes.
Ms. Garrison, if I can jump in here, this is John Baza. The oil that comes off of disposal facilities, I believe, is characterized as waste oil. And I'm pretty sure there's an exemption in the tax code that where they are exempt from paying taxes on waste oil.
Mr. Church has a question.
Yes, Bart, do any of the commercial facilities in the state accept out-of-state waste, like from across the border in Colorado?
Yes, I think that's an excellent question, Mr. Church. And the answer to that is yes, these facilities do accept E&P waste from other states at times. And I think that's one of the key distinctions is while the disposal facilities do support the oil and gas industry, and I think they're an important component of it, the state does not necessarily receive a conservation tax from activities associated from other states. So I think that's an excellent question, Mr. Church.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, well, thank you. That was very informative, and look forward to continued success in that disposal facilities program.
Thank you.
Turn the time back over to you, Mr. Baza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We would hope that as time would allow during these briefing sessions that we can bring items like this to display various parts of our programs to the board in just short kind of briefing matters that would allow you to see what the division is doing and what the significant issues are that we're facing through our various programs. That's the only identified briefing matter we have, but I do have some other items that have come up since we established the agenda for the meeting. The first of which is last week on Tuesday was a legislative interim meeting, and the Natural Resources Interim Committee of the legislature met, and I actually provided an item of discussion for them. It was concerning that how is the division and the industry responding to COVID-19, the economic disruption, and what types of things could the legislature do to assist us in doing our responsibilities for the state of Utah. So the thing that I brought up in that meeting was that we felt that we had some conflicting directives. As you know, we had the legislative audit from last November that identified certain things that the oil and gas program needed to proceed with and progress on. We also had some bills passed during the legislative session. One specifically was SB 148, which was a penalties bill that got passed that changed how the board and the division could issue fines and penalties for violations. And that particular bill would have required that we initiate formal rulemaking within 180 days of the effective date of the bill. Now, the bill was effective in May, which means that we would have needed to initiate formal rulemaking by November, first week in November, to meet that deadline. The messaging we were get from industry and from some of our stakeholders was that that was a big burden for industry to carry to try to address the numerous rulemakings that were being proposed. We actually had, I think Haley pointed out earlier this year that we had 6 identified rulemakings on the oil and gas side. We had 2 or 3 on the mining side that we were trying to address. And obviously during this time of COVID and economic disruption, it was difficult for industry to devote the time and attention to helping us craft effective rules. It was pretty clear, even looking at the oil and gas industry, that some companies have laid off up to 20% of their employees because of low commodity prices and lower activity levels in the oil fields. So I asked the legislature to just give us some clear direction. We had the impetus from the audit and from the legislative bills that were passed that suggested we needed to pursue this rulemaking. On the other hand, the concept being discussed at the legislative level was what kind of relief could be offered to both industry and government. I wasn't asking for anything in particular, but I was asking for direction from the legislature. But as it turns out, the day before the interim meetings last Tuesday, a bill was filed to be addressed in the special session of the legislature that occurred on Thursday of last week. This bill was Senate Bill 6004. It was being sponsored by Senator Winterton out of the Uinta Basin and co-sponsored by Representative Albrecht in the House. And what that bill does, and I'm going to do a bit of a screen share right now and see if I can bring that up. Hold on. So are you seeing the enrolled copy of SB 6004?
Yes.
Okay. This was addressed during the special session on Thursday. I really didn't have the notion that it was coming to pass when I gave my presentation to the interim committee. But this is what the bill is proposing, that there is essentially a pause on fees and on certain rulemakings until the end of June of next year. And there are 2 parts to the bill. One affects this part that affects section 19 of the code is for the Department of Environmental Quality. And if we scroll down, there's a section that affects 40-6, which is governing statute for the board and the division. in the oil and gas program. But the nature of the provisions in the bill were on or before June 30th of 2021, the board or division may not make, amend, or repeal a rule pursuant to this title if formal rulemaking was not initiated on or before July 1st, 2020. But there are some exemptions. For example, federally delegated programs, a rule which was mandated to be made before July 1st, a rule that is necessary because of imminent peril or danger to public health and safety, that sort of thing. So when we look at the rulemakings that we were expected to do, oh, by the way, this bill did pass, and I think it went on for the governor's signature. So it passed the special session on Thursday. So when we think about the rulemakings that this can apply to for the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining, because the SB 148 was passed by the general session and is required by that statutory change, it falls under one of these exemptions that's allowed. So we'll be proceeding forward with our efforts to bring that rulemaking to the board in order to start the formal process by the 1st of November. The rulemakings that are paused then would be, for example, bonding, which was something identified by the legislative audit. And since we hadn't commenced a rulemaking action before July 1 of this year, it's paused until July 1 of next year. Rules on horizontal drilling and seismic exploration that we had proposed, those are paused as well because we didn't initiate an action on those before July 1st, and they're not subject to a statutory mandate from the legislature. There are rulemakings on the mining side, which were also based on bills passed in the legislative session, and you will actually hear about a couple of those later on during the formal agenda today. So we are going to proceed with those rulemakings as well. But you can see that there is a pause on certain actions. The pause also applies to this part 3, imposing a new fee or an increase in fee. So that's also paused until next July. So we will not be doing any fee increases in the program during that time. I think I will stop sharing my screen at this point. And in any case, the bill also says that we can continue having stakeholder discussions on rules. It's just that we cannot initiate rulemaking on them within that period of time. So we will likely continue to work with stakeholders and identify how to best make those bills effective. And once the pause is lifted, we will bring those back to you as a board and have you consider those for rulemaking at that time. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Board members, any specific questions you'd like to ask Mr. Baza on this matter? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Baza, for that update. Very informative. And we'll see how this moves forward with the pause.
All right. So this is a good segue into our agenda and division calendar. There's a couple of things I wanted to bring up to you as far as scheduling. First of all, many of you were aware that the Uinta Basin Energy Summit, which normally happens at this time of the year, has been postponed. They've postponed that until next year. So board members and staff who would have been attending that will not be. This is following suit with similar postponements that we've seen for a lot of conferences and workshops that were scheduled for this fall. So it wasn't surprising, but just wanted to make sure you were aware of that. There's also scheduled in October, the Governor's Energy Summit is now combined with the Governor's Office of Economic Development. So it's going to be called the Governor's Economic and Energy Summit and will take place on October 26th, which is a Monday. They're offering options of both in-person attendance and virtual attendance. We would like to give the board the opportunity to participate in that as you would like to, and obviously the registration fees would be paid through the division. But if you would let us know how many of you might be interested in attending that. We don't know what the provisions are for in-person attendance yet. We probably won't know for another month, but if you would let us know if you would prefer virtual attendance over in-person attendance, then we will make those arrangements to get you properly registered.
Thank you, Mr. Buzz. I would assume that we could let Julianne know if we'd like to attend, and that she would be able to pass that information on to you. Would that be acceptable to?
That would actually be perfect. So perhaps sometime in the next week or so, don't be in a hurry for it, but send Julianne an email and let her know if you'd like to participate in that.
Julianne, you're willing to take on that responsibility? Since she's not responding, I'm assuming she'll take it on. Kind of like our votes. If you're not here, you get voted in.
It's okay. She understands.
Yep.
On the other parts of the calendar, I would just point out to you that in July, we did have the Uinta Basin Collaborative meeting as a virtual meeting. I think it was still fairly well attended. We were pleasantly surprised that we had 50 or 60 people logged in online to hear those presentations and have that discussion. But that is a quarterly meeting that the division hosts. So we'll be doing that again. And on my calendar, the next date for that meeting will be on October 8th. So keep that in mind and know that we will be sending out information on how to connect to that virtual meeting as well. I think that is all that we have for your briefing agenda this morning. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn the time back over to you for public comment or any other board business you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Baza. I should mention that typically at this time we would open the meeting to public comment. However, under the circumstances we're forced to work under in a remote broadcasting location, we accept public comment up until 11:59 p.m. on the day before the hearing. Therefore, there are no public comments to be accepted at this time. However, I would ask Julianne if she's aware of any public comments that have been submitted to be heard for today.
Been submitted for today.
Okay, thank you. Oh. I'm sorry, Julianne.
Did you hear me all right?
I can hear you now.
Okay, I said there were no public comments submitted.
Great, thank you. Before we conclude this portion of the hearing, we do have a matter of board business that we have discussed over the past couple of months, where we need to elect a chairman and vice chairman of the of the board, and the board has determined that we should do this in a public setting, and that those who are elected today will serve through at least March of 2021, at which time there may be some board members that may choose, whose terms are up and may choose not to continue. So at this time, I would take a motion for nomination of board chair and vice chair, followed by a vote of the board members.
Mr. Hansen,
Yes, Ms. Davis.
I would like to nominate Chris Hansen as chairman of the board and Mike Brown as vice chair of the board.
Is there a second? Because I'm certainly not going to second that.
I'll second that.
Is there a discussion on this motion? Hearing none, perhaps we should take a roll call vote. Ms. Carter, could you perform that task?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Michael Brown, how do you vote?
Yay.
Mr. Stephen Church, how do you vote?
Yay.
Ms. Susan Davis, how do you vote?
Yay.
Ms. Levon Garrison, how do you vote?
Yay.
Mr. Chris Hansen, Chairman Pro Tem, how do you vote?
Yay.
Mr. Gordon Moon, how do you vote?
Yay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have 6 affirmative votes.
Well, thank you. And I'm humbled and honored. I will try to perform my duties in a manner that will not disgrace those who have come before me, and will be appropriate, and will benefit the board and the division. Having concluded that portion of our board business, we will move on. Well, what we will do is we'll complete this briefing session, and we will close the meeting until 10 o'clock, at which time we will begin our formal hearing. And until that time, we have about 20 minutes, and we'll be back.